Shabir has inspired me to mention a few ahadith about the remembrance of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam as I begin. So if you allow me, it's mentioned in Kamal Ziyara regarding enjoining upon individuals the remembrance of Imam al-Husayn through eulogies and qasa'id and recitations. The sixth holy Imam is said to have said that one who recites a qasida for Imam al-Husayn, one who recites some sort of eulogy, a lamentation, a marthiyah as we know it, for Abu Abdullah al-Husayn and makes 10 people cry, he says, وَجَبَ عَلَيْهِ الْجَنَّةِ. Jannah becomes wajib upon him. Then Imam says, in actual fact, if he makes 9 people cry, if he makes 8 people, until he gets to one individual. He says, even if he makes one person cry because of Husayn alayhi salam, Allah has incumbinated Jannah upon this individual. Such is the remembrance of Imam al-Husayn that it is a fire, as we know, in the hearts of the believers that will never be extinguished. And it's upon you and me as individuals who have been blessed with the path of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam to do whatever we can to ensure that we not only maintain this flame but ignite it even further, not only within ourselves, in our families and our communities as well. And if that means that we have to begin to make slight changes so that the wider audience can begin to appreciate the sacrifice of Imam al-Husayn, then so be it. By this I mean, as an example, the language. You and I know, growing up, some of us might have understood a certain language of our forefathers. Moving to the West, our parents made that move for greener pastures, and in that move, things were lost. One of them may have been our language or the mother tongue that our parents had. And that's good in some senses, in the sense that the younger generation now have a different mother tongue and are stronger in their language of English, but also it has its negatives, in that a culture tends to come through its language. And if we lose that language, we lose parts of the culture as well. We build a new culture, which isn't wrong. To build a new culture is not wrong, provided it's maintained within the boundaries of morality that Islam has dictated. In order to ensure that the younger generation also have that spark for Imam al-Husayn, it might require us to change the language. Shabir and his brother, amongst others, are pioneers in ensuring that the marthiyah of Imam al-Husayn, the qasaid of Imam al-Husayn are mentioned in language. Even today, the speech is in English. 20, 30 years ago, especially when you first moved to Edmonton, I'm sure it would have been in Urdu or in Gujarati at that time. Times have changed, languages have changed, we have to adapt as well. But what we don't let go of is the core of our beliefs. The peripherals can change. The language can change, the food might change, the clothing might change. These are peripherals. When I mean clothing, I don't mean the wajibat clothing. I mean the clothing that you and I wear right now. That may change. What cannot change is the focal point of our religion. And that is that you and I are individuals who submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the path of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalus salati wassalam. There's one other tradition I wanted to mention before I begin. One of the most beautiful traditions on the Day of Judgment. The individuals who love Imam al-Husayn sit under the throne of Allah in the shade of the throne. You've heard on the Day of Judgment it's going to be extremely hot. The sun will come close to the earth. It'll be boiling. The sand will be burning. For majority of people, that will be a very trying and difficult time. But for those who have been submissive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have a hadith to say that they won't even be accounted for. For example, those who lament over Imam al-Husayn, they said before the accounting begins, Sayyidah Fatima alayha salam comes out onto mahshar and she cries out and she says, everybody who cried for Imam al-Husayn, my son, I give you shafa to enter into Jannah before the accounting. And then she goes a step further and she says, and you take the hands of 40 individuals that you wish to give shafa to and you enter as well. At that time, there are people who sit under the shade of the throne of God. And angels come to them and say, Allah has permitted you to enter into Jannah. You don't have to sit outside here on the boiling plains. Yes, you might be under the shade of the throne of God, but Jannah is waiting for you. Enter through every door that you wish, enter into Jannah. What is beautiful is their reply. In that they say, we would prefer to sit outside of Jannah if Hussein hasn't entered yet. We'll only enter after Hussein enters. For us, Jannah doesn't mean anything without the likes of Hussein within it. So you and I should take solace that through our grief of Imam al-Hussein, through our grief of the difficulties and the tragedies that befell the holy household of the Holy Prophet, it does twofold. One, it softens our heart, number one. But number two, and more importantly, it brings about an environment for change. This grief is only counted if it results in change. If I enter the Husayniyah, the same man as I leave the Husayniyah, then I haven't done anything. I came in, I lamented, I cried, I grieved, but I went out the same man. At the very least, after crying over Hussein, I should at least think about my actions and ask, am I in sync with the path of the Ahlul Bayt or not? And if there's something where I'm falling short, then at least in this gathering I should make a resolve with Allah that Allah, I will try and make change. I might fall short again. I might go back home and commit the same sin again. But at least right now when I'm sitting and I'm thinking and I'm asking myself, what gift has Allah given to me? What good have I done that the reward of that is that I was born into a family that loves Muhammad and Al Muhammad, that has the wilayah of Amirul Mu'mineen flowing in our bloods from the time that we were born, from the lullabies that our parents taught us and sang to us. They were about the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We've grown up in this environment. I have done nothing to deserve it. At the very least, as I sit here today listening to the Quran and the Ahadith and lamenting over Hussein, at the very least I should ask myself, is there anything that I should be doing that I'm not doing? And I should exit the doors of this Husayniyah, making a resolve with Allah that Allah, from tomorrow you shall see a different man, a different woman. I promise I will try my best to make a change. If I fall short, that's a different story. But at least the resolve to try and make change is present. Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam mentions in Dua Tawbah, he talks about why sometimes man is slow to change when it comes to change for the sake of God, but is quick to change when it comes to changing in front of people. He says, oh Allah, please do not think that I have belittled you. But God, when I sinned against people, they would reprimand me very quickly. If all of a sudden in this Husayni, if I stood up and I started doing something I shouldn't, if I started screaming and shouting as an adult, quickly people will tell me to sit down. They'll reprimand me very quickly. If I spilled something on purpose, people will tell me off very quickly. I'll be encouraged to change my ways very quickly. I'll be afraid. If I do something against the law of the land, if I speed, I'll get a ticket immediately. That's why I hold back. He says, oh Allah, when I did wrong against people, they were quick to punish me. That's why I was afraid of them. But God, when I did wrong against you, I realized that you were not quick to punish. You held back your punishment. So I did it a second time and you didn't punish me again. So a third, and then I became habituated to going against you. Until now, he says in Dua Tawbah, he says, until now that the clouds have dispersed in front of my eyes. And now I have seen who I have wronged, not what I did wrong. What I did wrong is the action. Who I wronged against. Who is it that I oppressed? My Lord who hasn't done anything wrong to me. My Lord who never fell short when it came to serving me and giving me from His blessing. Never shortchanged me. That's the Lord that I have wronged. In Dua bi Hamza, he tells Allah, أَنَا الصَّغِيرَ الَّذِي رَبَّيْتَ. Oh Allah, I am that young one that you nurtured. God, when I was in the womb of my mother, not even my mother could control the way I was growing. All she had to do and her duty was to eat right, eat good food, and that hopefully would get to me. She couldn't even control how that food went down her throat, how it entered into her stomach through the umbilical cord, entered me. Oh God, she had no control over that. You are the one who nurtured me. God, even when my mother and father had not even known, had no knowledge that I was conceived in the womb of my mother, you are aware of it. You placed me there and you made me grow inside her womb. And when it came to giving birth, when my mother gave birth to me, oh Allah, she didn't know whether the umbilical cord would tie itself around my neck and suffocate me and kill me. Nobody can control that. Even the midwives are not in control of that. Whether my heart would beat or where it would stop. If I'd be able to hear or not. Could I see or not? These were things that were in no one's control, oh God. You are the one who nurtured me, oh Allah. You made me the man I am today. أَنَا الضَّالَ الَّذِي هَدَيْتَ. I'm the one who went astray, God. You know how many times I slipped in my life? times that I'm aware of, times that I have forgotten, times that people are aware of because they saw me sinning, and times that it was done in private that nobody saw me sinning. But you're the one who brought me back to this path. Sitting here today should not be taken lightly. There are many people who have had the same upbringing that you and I have had, were born into the same types of families that you and I had the same opportunities to serve God and submit to Him through this religion, but have rejected it, and today sit somewhere else, listening to something else, acting in a fashion that is contrary to the laws of God. You and I should be thankful to the nth degree that we are individuals that Allah has blessed, that He has given us the path of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Yesterday, I was discussing the inexcusable excuses, that sometimes we lead ourselves onto a path that we begin to blame Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we begin to conceive the wisdom behind why God has given certain laws in order to reject them. I gave you a real life example yesterday that I heard myself about sitting on a table with alcohol. That you know the law. You refer to your jurist or jurists, and the law is very clear, at least from the mainstream, that you cannot sit on a table with alcohol if you're consuming food. If you're going to eat and drink, you can't sit on the table with alcohol. So if I'm sitting on that table at dinner, be it a lunch meeting, be it a dinner for work, if there's alcohol on the table, I have a duty. The duty is to get off the table or to ask the person to remove the alcohol, to stand up front. These are my duties. But sometimes I might want to sit there so much that I make excuses and I make a wisdom behind God's law. And the wisdom that I told you some people have made up yesterday was that some people say, but you know, at the time of the Prophet, if there was alcohol on your table, it was defined because everyone was a Muslim. So if you do it in a land that is Muslim, that is an Islamic land, then obviously it's shown as defiance. But today in this culture that we live in, it's not seen as defiance of God. And therefore it's allowed. That's me making up my own path. Somebody who makes up their own path doesn't know where it's going to lead. Sirat al-Mustaqim is a path that God has laid down, that the Ahlul Bayt have treaded and taught and asked us to follow, because that's a path that leads us to success. Another example I'd like to give today, again, real life example. Man and woman both have their own hijab. You and I as men have our hijab, both in terms of our eyes and our clothing as well. The environment that we put ourselves in, the gatherings in which we go to, how we interact with the opposite gender. These are all parts of our hijab. And the women folk have their own hijab as well. Obviously, the women folks' hijab is more identifiable when it comes to their clothing. They themselves are a beacon of light for us because they identify us as Muslims. Today, it's become a norm to have a beard. 20 years ago, being clean shaven was the trend. Today, having a beard is more of a trend. You can't tell a Muslim from a non-Muslim. 20 years you could. You could say that the beard is a sign of a Muslim. But it's not only the sign of the Muslim. There are other religions that also mandate a beard as well. But today when a Muslim woman walks down the street, she is identifiable immediately. She is our identity. If you walk on the street with your wife, she is the identity for you, that you are a Muslim couple. And I tell you from my experience, and I'm sure you can agree through your experience, that hijab in and of itself, the wearing of a headscarf and loose clothing, leave aside the other parts of hijab, just the headscarf and the loose clothing today I wish to touch upon, that itself brings about a barrier between a woman and a man, just the clothing, without having to say anything. When we used to go for Sunday football games for our kids, I would notice that the coach would come, he would shake hands with other women, kiss them on their cheeks, laugh with them, smile with them, crack jokes with them, talk nonsense with them, one lady after the other, one man after the other. But as soon as he came to us, without having to introduce ourselves as Muslims, all of a sudden he would take a step back, he would politely bow his head, he might put his hand on his chest, he'll ask how you are, in a respectful, dignified fashion, and he would leave. Anything that we spoke about there was only of benefit, was about the kids, was about the game, and that's it. How you are, how's your day been? Things of benefit, and there would be no nonsense. Because just the dress of a woman herself dictates that this is a dress of modesty and a dress of a barrier. Not too long ago in the US, you remember this whole Me Too movement that started. What was the crux of it? Why did it begin? What led to that stage that women had to say, our body is our property, we own it, and you as a man do not have the right to touch us without my permission. You as a man do not have a right to speak to me in a lewd fashion. What had society got to? What trajectory had they been on that all of a sudden women now had to say a very basic and very obvious statement that my body is mine, don't touch me without my permission? It's because there were no boundaries left. It's because all of a sudden covering up did not seem as an act of modesty. Modesty and freedom was in allowing everyone to dress how they wished, without any bounds or any morality. Do as you wish. Speak how you wish to women and to men. Touch people how you wish. Whistle at people how you wish. It got to that stage until women were being abused that women had to speak up. Islam from the onset has dictated. For men there is a hijab. Sometimes we talk about the women hijab too much to the extent that man may feel that he has no hijab. Men have a hijab. Women have a hijab. But the obvious hijab in terms of most obvious clothing has been mandated for the women. One excuse I heard for a woman not wearing a headscarf, which really triggered me a bit, just recently back in London. I heard that an individual was saying that women don't have to wear a headscarf because it was only part of the Arabian culture at the time of the Prophet. It was not an Islamic dress. And the reasoning was interesting. That all the Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Judaism, and of course Islam, came from Arabia, where it was extremely hot. And women's hair would be damaged by the heat. And it's for that reason that they used to cover themselves. Now we live in a society, well, aside from today, 36 degrees, we live in a society where it's not normally that hot, where the heat doesn't damage your hair. So there's no need to cover one's hair. This is what I'm speaking about and what I mentioned yesterday. That one by one, step by step, you and I can become desensitized to sin by making immorality morality, by making our own justifications. Either you and I lift our hands and tell God, sam'an wa ta'atan, I hear you and I obey you, without question. I'll question to find out. I'll touch upon this shortly. I'll question to find out, but oh God, if I realize this is the law that you've dictated, this is what you want from me, this is what you will get from me. Does that mean that Islam is telling us not to question? Not at all. Read the Quran. The Quran is very clear. قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Say, bring your proofs if you're of the truthful. الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلَ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ. Those who listen to different types of speech and then follow the best of it. Listen to different opinions, research, but then follow the best of opinions. The best of the opinions has to be the godly opinion. Find out what God wants from me, what He wants from you. There's a beautiful hadith from Isa alayhi salam. He says, the best opinion is not to negate the need for a second opinion. Never say to yourself, I know the truth. Never say to yourself, I'm at the helm of knowledge. There's nobody above me. The Quran is against that. وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. Above every knowledgeable person, there's a more knowledgeable person. Never think that you have all the knowledge in the world. Musa was told, the likes of Musa alayhi salam is told in the Quran, oh Musa, there is a righteous servant from my servants who has certain knowledge that you don't have. Musa tells his servant, let's go. We will travel the earth if we have to in order to find this individual because he has knowledge that I don't have. If he can give me godly knowledge, then I will only get closer to God through that knowledge. Research the religion. Find out about the religion, the laws of the religion, the akhlaq of the religion, the morality of the religion. Then you and I will have a framework as to how to live. Can I ask you, have you ever researched any other religion? If you don't, it's unlikely that you and I will appreciate what we have. As we grow up through schooling, we normally are told we'll be taught Christianity, we'll be taught Hinduism, Sikhism, different religions you'll be taught. And through the study of different religions, you begin to appreciate the religion that you have. Either you'll find a flaw in your religion and your framework, or you'll find that in actual fact your religion has morality unparalleled to any other religion. In this Risalatul Huquq of the fourth holy Imam, Imam says something that I've never heard and never seen in any other text, any other religious text. He talks about the rights of neighbors. You know how much the Prophet spoke about neighbors, to the extent that Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says, Imam says that the Prophet emphasized about neighbors so much that we thought he was going to mandate us to leave part of our wealth in our will to our neighbors. That's how much greatness and dignity and status he gave to our neighbors. The fourth holy Imam says, if you come back home with gifts for your children, and your children are playing outside with the children of your neighbors, if you're my follower, you do not have the right to gift your children in front of your neighbors' children without gifting them as well. Which religion teaches you morality like this? That even when it comes to children who will forget by tomorrow, but you don't have the right to break one child's heart at the expense of mending your child's heart. Giving your child a gift, and so the other children feel that my father didn't give me a gift today. What have you done to that child's heart? What have you done to their father? Maybe their father can't afford something. That's why he hasn't brought anything home. Maybe the mother is very busy and is in extreme difficulty. That's why she can't gift the children right now. But now you've planted a seed of doubt in the children's heart to say, why not my father? Why not my mother? Why his or why hers? Imam says, you don't have the right to do that. This is divine morality. Imam says, on a hot day, when you come outside, and if there's a cool breeze hitting your neighbor, and you go to speak to them, you do not have the right to stand in the way of the breeze and your neighbor such that it doesn't hit them anymore. I mean, what kind of men and women were these individuals? That at every step of their life, not only would they think of wajibat and muharramat, above that, talking about what is best. وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا, the Quran says, and speak to people in a polite fashion. If a child right now gets up and starts crying, if a child right now starts running around, you have two options, do you not? You and I can scream at the child, and the child will probably get frightened. And what if seed have we planted in the child's heart? Will that child want to come back to the Husainiyah tomorrow? Or they tell their parent that I got shouted at, I got screamed at. There are children. Children have to cry. If a child doesn't cry, there's a problem. Ask a midwife. As soon as the child is born, if the child's not crying, they hit the child on the back. You have to cry. If you're not crying, there's a problem here. Children have to cry. If a child doesn't run around, it's not a child. Which child sits here at the age of 5, cross-legged for the next 40 minutes? They're not children if they do that. There's something wrong here. They haven't been given the environment to be children and to explore. That doesn't mean we wreak mayhem within the Husainiyah. We have rules, we have guidances, but at the same time, if a child simply becomes a child and cries or wants to play with something and makes noise, there's a way to speak. There's a way to teach so that individuals are still welcome back to the center. In the same way, not only children, but adults as well. If somebody comes into the center wearing shorts, for example, somebody comes with a Mohican, strange looking individual, strange to our custom and norms, there's a way to speak. There's a way to inform individuals that we have certain etiquettes when we come to the place where God is remembered. There's certain clothing when we come to the prayer. But if you and I scream at individuals and speak to them in a fashion which doesn't call them towards the path of God, then these individuals will turn their back from the path of God. There's a difference, however, between leadership and the general rank and file of society. You do not put people who do not abide by the laws of God as your leaders. That's different. I spoke to you about Hur the other day, that he was not made a leader when going against God's laws in public. That's different. But for the general rank and file of society, there has to be a certain adab. The Quran is very beautiful when it speaks about Musa and Harun going to Fir'aun. Fir'aun is this man who claims to be God, sits on his throne and says, I am the greatest Lord. This is a man who has now had a dream about Musa's birth. He's asked his dream interpreters, they've told him about this child that will be born that will overthrow you. He is now given a command that every boy must be slaughtered and killed. He sends soldiers standing outside every woman's house who has signs of pregnancy until she gives birth. Then the midwife has to go assist in the birth, check if it's a boy or if it's a girl. If it's a boy, she must inform the soldier must kill the boy. If time allows, in another lecture, we'll speak about how Musa's birth was a miracle. The point being that this is the Musa that was then sought after by Fir'aun. When he's sought after, when Fir'aun sends an army for him, tries to kill him. Finally, when Allah tells Musa and Harun, go back to Fir'aun. Now go back to the same palace that you were brought up in. The man who is trying to find you and kill you, I want you to go back to preach to him, to call him back to the right path. He has a method and an etiquette of speech. He tells Musa and Harun, go to Fir'aun and speak to him قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. Speak to him in a soft, polite fashion. This is a man who claims to be God. Should I not stand in front of him and scream with pride? Allah says, speak to him in a soft fashion. Maybe he will change his ways. To reach an individual's heart is through soft words, step at a time. We cannot change an individual overnight. We have to change step by step. If you want to pray Salatul Layl, you do not all of a sudden say, from tomorrow I'm going to wake up half an hour before Fajr and pray 11 rak'ah. If I'm not able to wake up for Fajr on time, the first thing is slowly to try and make my Fajr on time, and then 5 minutes earlier. But you don't just start with 11 rak'ah. Rome wasn't built in a day, as the saying goes. You start, you say, I'll wake up half an hour before, 5 minutes, I'll just do wudu and I'll go back to bed. That's it. At least I get into the habit of waking up a bit before Fajr. Then the next step, the witr rak'ah, the shaf'a rak'ah, and then all of a sudden I begin to add on. Change happens slowly. However, when you and I see that the environment is pressurizing us so much that it's pushing us towards evil and immorality, you and I have to make a stance. When we're talking about slow change, we're talking about that change which is not going to fall us into haram. You're not going to tell somebody, stop drinking alcohol slowly. You're going to tell them, you need to stop drinking alcohol. The way in which you stop drinking alcohol might be step by step. But I'm not going to change my red line. I'm not going to say, it's okay if you drink this much today. It's never okay. The red line is the red line. You shouldn't have been drinking. But because you're an alcoholic, we'll take it step by step. In the same way, you and I as parents, we have a duty on our shoulders to ensure that the environment in which we place our children in is conducive for them to act upon the law of God and the morality of God. You as a father, me as a father, you as a mother, on the day of judgment will partake in the sin of the child if they fell into sin because of us pressurizing them and forcing them into an environment which they didn't want to go to. Yes, the child will also have a sin. The Quran is clear, وَلَا تَزْرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. Nobody will take the burden for somebody else. The child cannot say, I shift my burden on my parents. The child had free will at the end of the day. The child could have done certain actions, and provided they did and they tried their utmost, then maybe they are excused. But a parent, if a child comes to you and says, Dad, I can't help it, I'm fallen into a premarital relationship, I've fallen into this sin or that sin, because of the environment that I'm being put in. Dad, because of where we live. Look at the billboards around us. It shows you what certain beauty is. If the girl comes home and says, Dad, Mom, I can't live up to beauty as exerted on me, the pressures that my friend circle are exerting on me. I find it difficult to wear this headscarf. I can't wear it anymore. I can't wear loose clothing. I'm being mocked in society. Nobody speaks to me. I'm being bullied. The parent has a choice now. I'll tell you what the choice is. If this same child, God forbid, had a severe illness, and because of the environment and the heat or the cold that you're living in this country, because of the environment and the weather, that weather exacerbated the illness of the child, what would you do? Would it take you too long to make that decision? Because you and I value the existence of our children. I don't want a child who falls ill, let alone a child, God forbid, who passes away. I will do anything and everything, even if it means changing my job, even if it means migrating to another land, even if it means uprooting myself from one home and going to another home. I would do that for the sake of my child because I value their existence and their body, their physical being. If my spouse, God forbid, fell ill in the same way, and the only medicine and the only other cure was on the other part of the world, you can be certain that each and every one who sits here, come what may, will do anything in their power to move to the other side of the world to gain that medicine to cure their spouse. What is more important, brothers and sisters? The physical being and the body of a human being, or their soul? If you were to put it on a scale, which one is more important? Which one did Ayub get tested with, and which one was he successful with? Was he not tested with his physical body? Were his children not taken away from him overnight? 10 children killed overnight, taken away by God. All of his crops overnight burnt. His livelihood taken away. An illness taken upon his physical body that didn't affect his intellect. What does he say in the Quran when it gets too much for him? When the illness becomes too much. When the pressures of society become too much. He turns to God and he says, Anni massani adh-dhur. Oh Allah, difficulty has touched me. Does he blame God? He doesn't. He says, Wa anta arhamur rahimin. You're the most merciful of the merciful ones. But what he did do during that entire time where his body was being affected is that he looked after his soul and he never complained to God. Umar ibn Sa'ad was telling his companions to look after their bodies, whereas Hussein alayhi salam was saying, look after your souls. That was the difference between these two people. The difference between these two armies. That side was saying, we'll give you the riches of the earth. You will have everything at your fingertips. You'll buy houses, you'll own cities, everything. Your generations will be taken care of. Look after the physical pleasures of this dunya. But this side, with only a handful of people, was saying the hadith of the Prophet. And the hadith says, protect your body with everything. Protect your life with everything. But when it comes to the religion, protect your religion even with your life. Give up this body in order to protect the purity of your soul. This is what it means by following in the path of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam. That you and I see them, understand their morality, realize the do's and the don'ts, and then we follow them footstep in footstep. I want to mention a quick anecdote of Salman Farsi and Abu Dhar. You know, Abu Dhar was of a certain status and Salman was of a different status. Despite the fact that they were extremely close companions of the Prophet, no one could touch Salman. Abu Dhar comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam once and he says, oh Amir, tell me, how did Salman achieve the status that he achieved? What did he do? Show me so that I can also emulate. So Imam tells Abu Dhar, call Salman. Salman is called. Imam says, Abu Dhar, Salman, let's walk. He goes into the desert and they begin to walk. They walk for a while, then the Imam stops and he turns around and he tells Abu Dhar, how many sets of footprints are there? So Abu Dhar turns around and he says, oh Amir, there are 2 sets of footsteps. He says, but how many of us are there? He says, there are 3. He says, so where is the 3rd set of footsteps? He says, I don't know. He says, ask Salman. He says, Salman, where are your footsteps? Salman says, oh Abu Dhar, from the very moment that I met this man, I have followed him footstep in footstep. That's why you don't see my footstep. Even when I'm following him in the sand, I'm following and I'm stepping inside his footstep. To that degree, I want to be exactly like him. You and I, brothers and sisters, to conclude, have a duty upon our shoulders to ensure that the environment that we place our family in is conducive for growth, spiritual growth, not just material growth. Our parents migrated, and rightly so, for greener pastures to make sure that we had better health care, that we had better education. You and I have a different responsibility on our shoulders. The Quran is very clear. O you who believe, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. Protect yourself and your families from the fire of hell. That's your duty on the Day of Judgment. You will not be asked, did your son get a degree? Did he have a master's or a doctorate? You will not be asked, did you pay your mortgage before you died? You will not be asked how many properties was in your portfolio when you died. None of that is asked to you in your grave. What you will be asked of in your grave is this gift of children that I gave you. The gift of a spouse that I gave you. Did you protect them from the fire of hell? Because that's the command of God in the Quran. قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. There are certain signs of individuals who are trying to change their own environment and change themselves. You've heard this excuse many a times. probably an excuse that is overused incorrectly. That everybody's on their own journey. This individual doesn't wear hijab, observe hijab, they're on their own journey. This individual earns haram income, he's on his own journey. Let him be. Don't judge individuals. Imam al-Hussein teaches us to judge people by what they present themselves of themselves. Did Imam al-Hussein not judge Hur? Aren't we told Amr bil Ma'ruf is for what? Is for when somebody does something wrong in public, making it known to everybody what they're doing. Judge them on that. But the way to correct them is different. The way to correct them is not to humiliate them in public. Hurmatul mu'min ashraf min al-Ka'bah. That the sanctity of a believer is greater in the eyes of God than the Kaaba. You try and correct the individual in private first. You don't humiliate them. You speak to them. You advise them. You try and take them on a journey. Somebody who's not praying continuously, you tell them, come, let's pray together. Let me teach you the prayer. You don't know how to pronounce the Arabic, pray behind me. I'll teach you how to pray. Step by step, I take them. You can't fast today. Let's try, we'll fast together. You're saying it's too hot, it's too long. Let's fast. Let's go on a journey. Maybe we'll go for 10 days somewhere else. Maybe you'll find it easier to fast. We'll try and assist people. But do not be fooled with this excuse that I'm on my journey to God, so let me be. You have a duty and a right over me, and I have a right over you. If you see me doing wrong, you must correct me and help me. If I see you doing wrong, I have a duty to you to help you and correct you as well. Going on a journey has signs. If somebody is truly on their journey to God, and each of us are trying to get better day by day, but there are signs to this journey. As soon as you do not see these signs, then man is in a position of stagnation, and don't accept this excuse. It's an excuse that shaitan gives to you and me. Inshallah, tomorrow we'll continue. But it's an excuse that is on our tongues as well. Number one, if somebody says that they are on a journey, me myself, if I say that I'm on a journey, the first thing I must realize is that I firstly must accept that I'm doing wrong. Acceptance of wrong is the first step. If I turn around and say, I don't think I'm doing wrong in the first place, then that's not me being on a journey. That's not me accepting that I am willing to change and need to change. I have to accept first. What didn't shaitan do? He wasn't in acceptance that he had done wrong. He said, I'm better than Adam, created out of fire, out of clay. There was no acceptance of sin. I need to accept firstly that yes, God, there is blame on my shoulder. I am doing wrong. I have 10 years of qadha salah to repay. I'm not doing it. I'm accepting, God, that I'm doing something wrong every day by not trying to repay the salah one by one. Every day I'm living a life, I'm sleeping more, I'm entertaining myself more. You have a right against me, God, on the day of judgment. I left my prayers, I have to repay them. At least I should try. At least every day 2 rak'ah more. Fajr, at least every day begin to repay it. That's me showing myself that I've accepted wrong, number one. Number two, I'm taking action to try and correct myself. You see action. If I'm finding it very difficult to not earn money in this fashion, I only know how to work with interest. I only know how to invest in different firms, arms firms, breweries and the like. I need to start taking action. I need to start pulling my investment out of those shares, out of those companies, start putting them elsewhere. It might not happen overnight. I might be afraid of quitting my job overnight. Maybe it's the right thing to do, the godly thing to do, to rely on God. And overnight, remove myself from that job. If the only job I could find was inside a bar and I'm working there, should I not be trying extremely hard to work somewhere else? Should I not quit that job and come to my community members and say, can you please help me find a job? That's exertion of effort. The second sign, first, is that I accept that I'm doing something wrong. And the second one is that I'm taking steps to try and correct myself. If you do not see within me steps that I'm trying every day to correct myself, then it means that I have no shame left inside me, that I'm going against God. As soon as there is no shame left in man, he'll be willing to go against God in public and in private. The hadith of the Ahlul Bayt say, one who defies God in public in front of people will have no problem in defying God in private. If you can sin in public, be sure that you and I can sin in private as well. To conclude then, what we learn from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam is that you and I have a duty on our shoulders with the gifts that God has given us. The signs that somebody is on their journey to change is that they're willing to accept fault, that yes, I've done something wrong, God, or I'm doing something wrong. And God, in return, let me show you that I'm willing to change by taking action. The first is that I'm ashamed of my actions. I don't announce it to people. I try and hide it. Secondly, God, you'll see, step by step, I'll begin to undo what I've been doing until a time comes that I can stand in front of you on the day of judgment and tell you, God, I tried my utmost. I may not have reached the finish line, but I tried my best.